The rain fell in relentless sheets, soaking the streets of Manhattan and blurring the neon lights into a kaleidoscope of despair. Ethan Caldwell, a billionaire tech mogul at 32, stood frozen under his umbrella, staring at a boy curled up on a park bench, shivering under a tattered jacket. Something about the scene, a teenager alone, abandoned in the storm, clawed at Ethan's heart, pulling him back to a past he'd buried long ago. Central Park was nearly deserted at this hour, the late October chill driving most New Yorkers indoors. Ethan had been cutting through on his way to a penthouse gala, his tailored suit pristine despite the downpour. He was used to moving through the world untouched, his wealth a shield against its Messier realities. But the boy on the bench, no older than 17, looked like he'd been chewed up and spat out by life. His dark blonde hair clung to his forehead, and his thin frame shook with each gust of wind. Ethan's polished loafers hesitated on the wet path. He should keep walking. He always kept walking. Yet he didn't. Instead, he approached, his heart pounding with an instinct he couldn't name. "Hey," he called softly, crouching beside the bench. "You okay?" The boy stirred, his eyes fluttering open, strikingly blue, even in the dim streetlight. They held a mix of fear and defiance, like a cornered animal unsure whether to fight or flee. "I'm fine," the boy muttered, pulling his jacket tighter, though it did little to hide his trembling. "You don't look fine," Ethan said, his voice gentler than he intended. He glanced around, half expecting someone to claim the kid, a parent, a friend. But the park was empty, the rain a curtain between them and the world. "What's your name?" The boy hesitated, his gaze darting to Ethan's expensive watch, then back to his face. "Lucas," he said finally, his voice rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Lucas Harper." The name hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. Harper. It couldn't be. He forced his expression to stay neutral, but his mind raced. Could this be the Harper? The son of the man who'd once been Ethan's mentor, his savior, until everything fell apart? Ethan had spent years burying those memories, building an empire to escape them. But now, staring at Lucas's haunted eyes, he felt the past clawing its way back. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his head. Lucas shook his head, his jaw tight. "Not anymore." The words were clipped, but they carried a weight Ethan recognized. Rejection, abandonment, the kind that left scars. He'd seen it before, in himself, in the mirror of his own youth. Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat and draped it over Lucas's shoulders. "Come with me," he said, "just for tonight. You can't stay out here." Lucas flinched, suspicion flashing in his eyes. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Ethan didn't have an answer, not one he could say aloud. "Because I might know exactly who you are. Because I owe your father more than I can ever repay. Because I've been where you are, and someone saved me once." Instead, he said, "No one should be alone in a storm like this. Let me help." Lucas stared at him, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded, standing shakily. Ethan led him to his sleek black car, parked nearby, the driver's eyes widening, but saying nothing as they climbed in. The ride to Ethan's Upper East Side penthouse was silent, the hum of the engine drowned out by the questions screaming in Ethan's mind. Was Lucas really Daniel Harper's son? And if he was, how had he ended up here, homeless and broken? The penthouse was a world away from the rain-soaked park. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that screamed power. Lucas stood in the foyer, dripping wet, looking wildly out of place. "This is insane," he muttered, his eyes scanning the space like he'd stepped into a dream. "Shower's down the hall," Ethan said, pointing. "I'll get you some dry clothes." Lucas hesitated, then nodded, disappearing into the bathroom. Alone, Ethan poured himself a whiskey, his hands shaking slightly. He pulled out his phone and typed Lucas Harper into a search, his heart sinking as the results confirmed his fears. Daniel Harper's obituary, dated 2 years ago. A single line mentioned a surviving son, Lucas, aged 15 at the time. Ethan's mentor, the man who'd pulled him from the streets and given him a chance, was gone. and his son was now the boy shivering in Ethan's guest bathroom. When Lucas emerged, wearing Ethan's oversized sweatshirt and sweatpants, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "Why are you doing this?" Lucas asked, his voice sharper now, less guarded. "You're some rich guy. What's in it for you?" Ethan set down his glass, meeting Lucas's gaze. "I knew your father," he said quietly. Lucas froze, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. "What?" "Daniel Harper. He changed my life." Ethan's voice cracked slightly, the weight of the past pressing down. "I didn't know he had a son until tonight. I didn't know you were out here." Lucas's face hardened, his fists clenching. "You don't know anything about me," he snapped. "Don't pretend you do." He turned toward the door, but Ethan stepped in front of him. "Lucas, wait. I'm not pretending. I owe your dad everything. If he were here, he'd want me to help you." Lucas laughed, a bitter sound. "Yeah? Well, he's not here, and I don't need your pity." But he didn't move, his eyes betraying a flicker of something. Hope? Maybe, or desperation. Ethan saw it and made a decision. He wasn't letting Lucas walk back into that storm. Not tonight. Not ever, if he could help it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, painting the city in hues of gold and possibility. Lucas sat at the kitchen island, picking at a plate of eggs and toast Ethan had ordered from a nearby diner. He looked out of place in the sleek, modern space, his borrowed clothes hanging loosely on his frame. Ethan watched him from across the counter, trying to read the boy's guarded expression. Lucas hadn't said much since last night's outburst, but the tension between them crackled like static. "You don't have to stay," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "But you can. At least until we figure out what's next." He kept his tone neutral, not wanting to push too hard. Lucas's eyes flicked up, sharp and wary. "Figure out what's next?" Lucas echoed, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You think you could just swoop in and fix my life? I've been on my own for 2 years. I don't need a savior." Ethan leaned back, sipping his coffee to buy time. He'd spent the night digging into Lucas's story, piecing together fragments from old articles and social media. Daniel Harper's death had been sudden, a car accident that left Lucas orphaned at 15. Foster care followed, then a string of runaway reports. The kid had been through hell, and Ethan's got twisted at the thought of how alone he must have felt. "I'm not trying to fix you," Ethan said carefully. I owe you dad. He gave me a shot when I was your age. I was on the streets, too." Lucas's fork paused midair, his eyes narrowing. "You? A billionaire? Don't bullshit me." "It's not bullshit," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I was 16, kicked out for being gay. Daniel found me, got me into a shelter, paid for my first coding boot camp. Without him, I'd be nowhere." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I didn't know he had a son. If I had, I would have looked for you." Lucas's jaw tightened, and he looked away, staring out at the city skyline. "He never mentioned you," he said quietly. "Guess he didn't tell me a lot of things." The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Ethan wanted to ask more, about Daniel, about what had happened to Lucas, but he sensed the boy wasn't ready. Instead, he changed tack. "What do you need right now? A place to crash? Food? A job?" Lucas snorted, but there was less venom in it. "You're really going to play hero, huh?" He pushed his plate away, his fingers tapping restlessly on the counter. "I don't know what I need. I can't go back to foster care. And I'm not going back to that shelter. They didn't care who I was, just that I was a problem." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He could offer Lucas a guest room, but that was temporary. The kid needed stability, purpose, something Ethan knew too well from his own past. "What if I got you into a program? Coding, design, something to get you on your feet. You could stay here while you figure out." Lucas's eyes flicked to Ethan's, searching for the catch. "Why? What's in it for you?" The question stung, but Ethan understood it. Trust was a luxury Lucas couldn't afford. "No catch," he said. "Just a debt I need to repay." He hesitated, then added, "And maybe I don't want to see you back on that bench." For a moment, Lucas didn't respond. Then he shrugged, his voice softer. "Fine, but I'm not your charity case." "Deal," Ethan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. He didn't push further, sensing Lucas needed space. Over the next few days, they fell into an uneasy rhythm. Lucas stayed in the guest room, ate Ethan's food, and spent hours on the couch with a borrowed laptop, teaching himself basic coding from free online courses Ethan suggested. Ethan watched from a distance, torn between hope and fear. He wanted to help, but every step felt like navigating a minefield. One evening, as Ethan worked late in his home office, Lucas knocked on the doorframe. "Hey," he said, holding up the laptop. "I made something. It's dumb, but want to see?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Show me." Lucas opened the laptop, revealing a simple game, a pixelated character dodging falling blocks. It was rough, but it worked. Ethan's chest tightened with pride. "Not bad for a beginner," he said, grinning. "You've got talent." Lucas's cheeks flushed, and for the first time, he smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "Thanks," he muttered, looking away. "I used to mess around with this stuff before everything went to shit." The moment felt fragile, like a crack in Lucas's armor. Ethan wanted to ask more, but a notification pinged on his phone, a reminder of a charity gala he was hosting tomorrow night. On impulse, he said, "Come with me tomorrow. It's a fancy thing, but you get to meet some people who could help you. Tech folks, mentors." Lucas's smile faded, replaced by suspicion. "Why? So you can show off your new project?" Ethan winced. "No, because I think you're worth betting on. Like your dad bet on me." Lucas didn't respond, but the next night he showed up in the living room, awkwardly tugging at the sleeves of a borrowed suit. Ethan's breath caught. Cleaned up, Lucas looked like a younger version of Daniel. Same sharp jawline, same piercing eyes. The resemblance was uncanny, and it stirred something in Ethan he couldn't name. Not attraction, not exactly, but a pull, a connection that felt dangerous and inevitable. At the gala, Lucas was quiet, sticking to the edges of the glittering ballroom. Ethan introduced him to a few colleagues, careful not to overwhelm him. But as the night wore on, Ethan noticed someone watching Lucas, a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed, his gaze too intense, too knowing. Ethan's instincts flared. He recognized the man, Richard Voss, a rival CEO with a reputation for digging up dirt on anyone who crossed him. And the way he was looking at Lucas wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. The gala chandelier light cast a warm glow over the crowd, but Ethan felt a chill as he watched Richard Voss approach Lucas. The man's smile was polished, predatory, and Ethan's gut screamed danger. He excused himself from a conversation and moved toward them, catching the tail end of Voss's words. "Didn't expect to see you here, Lucas. It's been a while." Lucas's face drained of color, his hands balling into fists. "I don't know you," he said, his voice tight, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Ethan stepped between them, his own smile cold. "Richard," he said, extending a hand. "Didn't know you were invited." Voss's eyes flicked to Ethan, his expression unreadable. "Ethan Caldwell. Always a pleasure. I was just saying hello to your guest." He lingered on the word, a subtle challenge. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. "Lucas is with me. Enjoy the party." He steered Lucas away, his hand firm on the boy's shoulder, feeling the tension radiating from him. In a quiet corner, Lucas pulled free, his breathing uneven. "Who the hell was that?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "No one," Lucas snapped, but his hand was shaking. "Just some guy from before. It's nothing." "It's not nothing," Ethan pressed, his instincts screaming. "He knew you." "How?" Lucas's eyes darted away, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He was a foster parent, one of the bad ones." The words hit Ethan like a freight train. He'd heard stories. Kids in the system, vulnerable, preyed upon by people who were supposed to protect them. The thought of Lucas enduring that made his blood boil. "Did he hurt you?" Ethan asked, his voice barely controlled. Lucas shook his head, but his expression said otherwise. "I got out. That's what matters." He looked up, his eyes fierce. "Don't make this a thing, okay? I don't need you fighting my battles." Ethan wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the raw vulnerability in Lucas's voice stopped him. Instead, he nodded. Okay, but you're not alone anymore. Got it. Lucas didn't respond, but the way his shoulders relaxed slightly told Ethan he'd heard. The rest of the night passed in a blur, Lucas sticking closer to Ethan, avoiding Voss's gaze. When they returned to the penthouse, Lucas disappeared into his room without a word. Ethan sat up, unable to sleep, his mind racing with questions. Who was Voss to Lucas? And what else was the boy hiding? The next morning, Ethan found Lucas in the living room, scrolling through a news article on the laptop. The headline read, Tech Tycoon Ethan Caldwell spotted with mystery teen at gala. Ethan's stomach dropped. The article speculated wildly, some calling Lucas a charity case, others hinting at scandal. Lucas's face was unreadable as he closed the laptop. This why you brought me? So people could gawk? No, Ethan said firmly. I brought you because I thought it could help. I didn't think. You didn't think, Lucas cut in, his voice sharp. You don't get it, do you? People like you, with your money and your power. You think you can just fix things. But you can't. Not this. Ethan took a step closer, his voice low. I'm not trying to fix you, Lucas. I'm trying to give you a chance. Like your dad gave me. Lucas's eyes flashed with anger, then softened, his voice breaking. My dad didn't give me anything. He left me, died and left me with nothing. The confession hung between them, raw and jagged. Ethan wanted to reach out, to pull Lucas into a hug, but he held back, sensing the boy's need for space. Instead, he said, You're not nothing, and you're not alone. Not anymore. Over the next week, Ethan doubled down on helping Lucas. He enrolled him in a coding boot camp, paid for out-of-pocket, and gave him a part-time job at his company, running small tasks to build his confidence. Lucas resisted at first, but his natural talent shone through, earning praise from Ethan's team. For the first time, Ethan saw a spark in Lucas, a hunger to prove himself. But the shadow of Richard Voss lingered. Ethan hired a private investigator to dig into the man's past, uncovering a trail of allegations. Abuse, manipulation, all swept under the rug by his wealth and connections. The more Ethan learned, the more protective he felt, a fierce need to shield Lucas from the world's cruelty. It was a feeling that went beyond obligation, stirring something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. One evening, as they sat on the penthouse balcony watching the city lights, Lucas spoke softly. You ever feel like you don't belong anywhere? His voice was barely audible, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. All the time, when I was your age. Sometimes even now. He paused, then added, But you find people who make you feel like you do. Lucas turned to him, his blue eyes catching the light. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Ethan felt a jolt. A connection that was more than mentor and mentee, more than a debt to the past. It was dangerous, uncharted, and it terrified him. Lucas looked away first, his cheeks flushed, and the moment passed. But it left Ethan shaken, wondering what line he was crossing and whether he could stop. Weeks turned into months, and the penthouse became a strange kind of home for Lucas. He threw himself into the coding boot camp, his skills growing sharper with each project. Ethan watched with a mix of pride and unease, aware of the growing bond between them. Lucas was no longer the scared kid on the bench. He was finding his footing, his confidence, but the weight of his past still lingered in his silences, his guarded glances. One afternoon, Ethan returned from a board meeting to find Lucas pacing the living room, his face pale. What's wrong? Ethan asked, dropping his briefcase. Lucas held up his phone, showing an email. Voss, he's been asking about me. Found out I'm working for you. The words came out fast, panicked. He says he wants to catch up. Ethan's blood ran cold. He took the phone, scanning the message. It was polite, too polite, dripping with false concern. You're not meeting him, Ethan said, his voice firm. He's dangerous. You think I don't know that? Lucas snapped, his voice rising. He was my foster parent for 6 months. I know exactly what he's capable of. His hands shook, and Ethan saw the boy from the park again, vulnerable, cornered. Tell me, Ethan said quietly. What did he do? Lucas's eyes dropped to the floor, his voice barely audible. He didn't touch me. Not like that. But he made me feel like I owed him. Like I was nothing without him. When I ran, he said he'd find me. Always. The confession broke something in Ethan, a rage he hadn't felt in years. He won't touch you again, Ethan said, his voice steel. I promise you that. Lucas looked up, his eyes searching Ethan's. Why do you care so much? This isn't your fight. Ethan hesitated, the truth pressing against his chest. Because you're more than Daniel's son. Because I see myself in you. Because I'm falling for you, and it's tearing me apart. Instead, he said, because no one should have to live in fear. Not you. Not anyone. Lucas nodded, but the fear didn't leave his eyes. Ethan spent the next few days tightening security, ensuring Voss couldn't get near Lucas. He also pushed his investigator to dig deeper, uncovering a pattern. Voss had a history of targeting vulnerable teens, using his influence to silence them. Ethan knew he had to act, but he also knew the cost. Taking on Voss meant risking his company, his reputation. But for Lucas, he was willing to burn it all down. One night, as they worked late on a coding project, Lucas laughed, a rare, genuine sound that lit up the room. You're not as bad as I thought, he said, nudging Ethan's shoulder. The touch was casual, but it sent a spark through Ethan, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He caught Lucas's gaze, and for a moment, the air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. Careful, Ethan teased, trying to keep it light. I might start thinking you like me. Lucas's smile faltered, his eyes softening. Maybe I do, he said, so quietly Ethan almost missed it. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Ethan's heart raced, torn between wanting to close the distance and knowing he shouldn't. Lucas was 19 now, no longer a kid, but the power imbalance, Ethan's wealth, his age, made it feel impossible. Before he could respond, Lucas leaned forward, his lips brushing Ethan's in a tentative kiss. It was soft, fleeting, but it set Ethan's world on fire. He pulled back, his breath uneven. Lucas, we can't. Why not? Lucas asked, his voice raw. I know you feel it too. Ethan stood, running a hand through his hair. You're young. You've been through hell. I don't want to take advantage. You're not. Lucas cut in, standing too. I'm not some broken kid you need to fix. I want this. I want you. The confession shattered Ethan's resolve. He stepped closer, cupping Lucas's face, searching his eyes for any hint of doubt. There was none. When their lips met again, it was deeper, hungrier, a release of months of tension. But as they pulled apart, Ethan's phone buzzed, a message from his investigator. Voss had filed a lawsuit, claiming Ethan was harboring a troubled runaway. The fight was coming, and it would test everything. The lawsuit hit like a tidal wave, dominating headlines and casting a shadow over Ethan's empire. Voss's claims were vicious, accusing Ethan of exploiting Lucas, painting him as a predator. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan, knowing Voss's own history, but the public didn't care about truth. They devoured the scandal, and Ethan's stock plummeted. Lucas, now a constant presence in the penthouse, was furious, blaming himself. This is my fault, Lucas said one night, pacing the living room. If I hadn't stayed, none of this would have happened. Ethan grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to stop. This is Voss's doing, not yours. He's trying to break us. Don't let him. Lucas's eyes glistened, his voice breaking. I'm not worth this, Ethan. Your company, your life. You're worth everything, Ethan said, his voice fierce. He pulled Lucas into a hug, holding him tightly as the boys' walls crumbled. We'll fight this. Together. The legal battle was grueling, but Ethan's investigator struck gold. A former foster child of Voss's, now an adult, willing to testify about his abuse. Others came forward, their stories mirroring Lucas's. Ethan used his wealth to amplify their voices, funding legal aid and media campaigns to expose Voss. It was a gamble, but it paid off. The lawsuit collapsed, and Voss faced charges, his empire crumbling under the weight of his sins. Through it all, Ethan and Lucas grew closer, their bond forged in fire. Lucas finished his boot camp, landing a job at a startup, his confidence blooming. Ethan, for the first time, felt like he was building something real, not an empire, but a life. Their relationship deepened, no longer shadowed by doubt or guilt. They were partners, equals, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that had tried to break them. One spring evening, they returned to Central Park, to the bench where it all began. The air was warm, the city alive with possibility. Lucas sat, pulling Ethan down beside him. "This is where you found me," he said, his voice soft. "I thought I was done, that no one cared." Ethan took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "I cared. I always will." Lucas smiled, leaning his head on Ethan's shoulder. "I know." The sunset painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, and for the first time, Lucas felt like he belonged, not just to Ethan, but to himself. The world had tried to tear them apart, but they'd emerged stronger, their love a testament to resilience, to second chances, to the power of finding home in another person. As they sat, a young couple passed, glancing at the bench. Carved into its wood, barely noticeable, were the words, "Love finds you when you least expect it." Lucas traced them with his finger, his smile widening. "You think that's true?" he asked. Ethan kissed his forehead, his heart full. "I know it is.